All right, so for this last recording of our second unit, I want to talk about how joints exert mechanical advantage, right? So your body is put together in a way such that when you use your muscles, you can either exert a maximum amount of force or you can get a maximum amount of return, or somewhere in between. And all of this has to do with principles of leverage. Every movable joint acts as a lever. So all joints are basically lever systems. And, you go back to Aristotle and the ancient Greeks, and a lever is just a board with a fulcrum, right? You got a board here. Oops. You got a board, and you got a fulcrum, which is the pivot point, right? And every lever just means that you've got one side of the board you're applying force on, and a different part of the board is where the movement occurs. So all levers have three important elements. Resistance. It's important, so I'm circling it. Resistance is the center of mass that you're trying to move. That is where the weight is applied. Whether we're talking about like a weight that you're lifting or just the weight of the limb that you're trying to move, it's where the center of weight is, where the center of mass is. In joints, this is typically going to be the appendage, the thing that is moving. Usually it's your appendage that moves. Second, we have the effort. Effort is where you apply force. In joints, this is typically going to be the tendon attachment point, right? Your muscles are going to be what generates the force. Where that force is applied is where the tendon attaches to the bone. Last, we have the fulcrum. The fulcrum is the stable point around which everything moves. So in joints, the fulcrum is the joint itself, right? That's the stable point. Things move around the joint. So as you see here, this is a very standard lever, kind of a teeter-totter-like thing. You can see we have the fulcrum here. That's the stable point. We have the effort arm. The effort arm is the length of our stiff board between the fulcrum and where the effort is applied. Effort is applied down here, so this is the length of the effort arm. If we were to apply the effort here, our effort arm would be much shorter. Here is our resistance, right? The thing that we're trying to move. The length of the resistance arm is the distance between the fulcrum, the stable point, and where that center of resistance mass is. So here, this is the center of our resistance mass. So this is the length of our resistance arm. If we were to take this box and move it over here, right? So we have a box that looks like this. Then our resistance arm would be much shorter. We describe levers as being basically in terms of the length of their resistance arm and the length of their effort arm. When you compare the resistance arm and the effort arm, what you get is mechanical advantage. There are two types of advantage that levers can convey, and they're opposite. So you can't really have both types of advantage at once. So you can have the sort of advantage where you can amplify the amount of force that you apply. So you exert more force, or at least the object feels more force than you're putting in, right? But it moves a smaller distance. So a classic example of this is a crowbar, right? With a crowbar, you have a short resistance arm, the little hook on the crowbar, and you have a long effort arm, the end of the crowbar that you're putting force on. You can move things with a crowbar that you would never be able to move with just the force that you're applying alone. You could like bend metal with a crowbar, and you would never be able to just bend the metal by using your arms, right? And that's because the mechanical advantage allows you to multiply the amount of force that you are applying. But you're moving your arms a lot, and the thing at the end of the crowbar, even though it's experiencing a lot of force, is only moving a very small distance. So the other type of advantage is the opposite. You can have the advantage of moving the resisting object further or faster than the effort arm is moved, right? So this is like rowing a boat, or using, if you've ever seen like polo, or not polo, game, well, or like baseball, actually. So let's do baseball, right? So, if you hit a ball with a bat, you can move that bat much faster than you could just move your arm. And theoretically, the longer that bat is, the faster you can get the tip of it that's going to hit the ball moving. So that means that you have to put in more effort, you have to put in more force, but what you get out is greater movement. Every lever is a balance between these two things. The more of one you have, the less of the other you have to have. These two different types of advantage are measured using the mechanical advantage number, which is the ratio of the output force to input force. And it's calculated by the length of the effort arm divided by the length of the resistance arm. If your effort arm is longer than your resistance arm, then you will have a mechanical advantage greater than 1. That means that your lever produces more force, but less speed and distance. If mechanical advantage is less than 1, your effort arm is smaller than your resistance arm, then you produce more speed and distance, but you end up applying less force. Different muscles and joints in your body are going to function as different types of lever with different types of mechanical advantage. So, for instance, take a look at your biceps. Like, get out your arm, take a look at your bicep, right? Okay, you see where your bicep is attached? Right? What is your bicep going to be moving? When your bicep contracts, it's going to move your ulna, your forearm, upwards, right? Now look at where it's attached. It's attached right next to the elbow, right? Your bicep is on your brachial region, right, on your humerus, and when it contracts, it pulls against the part of your ulna that is closest to the elbow. Where's the other end of attachment? The other end of attachment at the biceps is way up close to your shoulder, right? So take a look at the distance between those two arms, all right? One is between your elbow and just past your elbow. That's the resistance, all right? That's where, that's the effort arm, all right? Now the resistance, that's going to be the center of mass of your forearm. So you can get relatively small amounts of movement from your biceps. Your bicep contracts like an inch or two, and that can produce several feet of movement in your hand. So that is a mechanical advantage less than one situation. It takes more force, but you get a lot more motion out of it. There are 3 different classes of levers depending upon how the fulcrum, resistance, and effort are arranged. A first-class lever is a teeter-totter. So you can see here, right? You have an effort on one side, you have a resistance on the other, and you have the fulcrum in between them. Now, depending upon the type of mechanical advantage you want to get, right, you could have the effort arm be really short. That means that you're going to need somebody who's really fat on the effort side, but they'll be able to launch this kid over here, boom, way up. Or you could have the resistance arm be very short, right? The resistance arm was very short. You could have somebody really fat over here, and like even a small kid would be able to move them up and down. You're not going to move them up and down by very much. So this has nothing to do with the type of mechanical advantage you get. It has to do with the arrangement of the effort, resistance, and fulcrum. An example of this type of joint is the atlanto-occipital joint, which is basically the joint that connects your occipital condyles, right, in your occipital bone, to the atlas, your top spine, right? So the fulcrum is the joint. The effort is applied by this muscle back here, pulling down on the back of the head. And where's the resistance? Center of mass of the skull, where gravity pulls down, over here. So you have your effort on one side, resistance on the other, fulcrum in the middle. This is your classic lever. This is your teeter-totter. This is your crowbar. It's probably what most of us think of when we think of a lever. There's actually 2 more classes. Second class of lever. This is where you have your effort and resistance on the same side as each other from your fulcrum, and the effort is further away from the resistance. This type of lever is a wheelbarrow, right? So you see with this wheelbarrow here, what's the fulcrum? Fulcrum's the wheel. That's what's staying stable. Where's the resistance applied? Resistance is applied down here where your tub is. Where's the effort applied? The effort is applied up here at the handles. With this type of lever, you will always have a mechanical advantage greater than 1. You will always be, basically, you'll be moving your effort more, but exerting more force on the resistance. You can lift more with a wheelbarrow than you could just picking it up with your hands, right? So you have a mechanical advantage that way. The difference is that you're going to have to move these handles up by a couple of feet, And the resistance is only going to rise by a few inches. But that's enough with a wheelbarrow. An example of a muscle that follows this type of lever system is so your quadriceps moving your knee up. Your quadriceps wrap around your knee and exert force up at the patella. And your fulcrum here, what's moving is your hip, right? So you're moving the knee up in the air. The knee joint doesn't change. This angle isn't flexing. But you're moving this up like that. Where's the center of mass? Center of mass is down there. The fulcrum is the hip over here. And so you can see the effort and resistance are on the same side of the fulcrum, and the effort is further away. The last type of lever is the effort and resistance on the same side of the fulcrum, but the effort is closer and the resistance is further. This will always have a mechanical advantage less than 1. You will always be putting more force in and getting more distance, or you be putting less force in and be getting more distance out. An example of this is your biceps elbow. All right? So here we have, where is the effort being applied? The effort is being applied at the tendon attachment point. Where is the resistance? The resistance is the center of mass of your forearm, which is what's being moved. Both of these are on the same side of the fulcrum, which is the elbow. But the effort is being applied much closer to the fulcrum than the resistance is being applied. So you put in, you relatively speaking, less force, but you get more movement. So to sum up, you need to know the 3 parts of the lever: the effort, the resistance, the fulcrum. You need to know basically what each is and how they're going to relate to the anatomy of a joint. So like if I give you a particular type of motion at a joint, I need you to be able to tell me which is the resistance, which is the effort, where the fulcrum is. I need you to know what the 2 different types of mechanical advantage are and be able to determine, based on the length of the effort arm versus the resistance arm, whether this joint is exerting mechanical advantage greater than 1 or mechanical advantage less than 1, and what that means. You need to be able to classify joints as being in one of the 3 classes that we talked about here, based on the position of the effort and resistance relative to the fulcrum. There will probably be not a ton of questions on this on the test, but there will be at least 1 or 2. So you should at least try to work through these type of problems.